It was great to be able to do something like that because it gave me a focus. You can just switch off for a few minutes and concentrate on the birds, and I love that. It added a little bit of sanity to what was a very different environment for me.
If it weren't for the birds, what a hell it would be. I watch them singing and something comes into my throat that makes me almost greet.
Those birds were angels in disguise, bringing instant relief to the nerves and tempers of the mess.
The magpies in Picardy are more than I can tell. They flicker down the dusty roads and cast a magic spell on the men who march through Picardy to hell. A magpie in Picardy told me secret things of the music in white feathers and the sunlight that sings and dances in deep shadows. He told me with his wings. He told me that in Picardy, an age ago or more, while all his fathers still were eggs, these dusty highways bore brown singing soldiers marching out through Picardy to war. He said that still through chaos works on the ancient plan, and two things have altered not since first the world began: the beauty of the wild green earth and the bravery of man.
My recently widowed grandmother, with her 7 children, photographed in 1902, shortly after the death of their father. Life was going to be hard for them all, but the family had a stoical faith which gave them optimism and courage. My 6-year-old father, George, wears his sailor suit with pride, a powerful symbol of the greatest empire the world had ever known. But in just 12 years' time, that faith in God and empire would be shattered by the bloodiest war in human history. George and brother Joe were early volunteers and endured 4 years in the killing fields of France. One morning in July 1917, a uniformed boy on a bike delivered a telegram to Gran with the news that Joe had been shot through the jaw. A severe wound that affected the rest of his life, but did not stop him being sent back to the trenches after 2 months in hospital. That very same afternoon, another telegram announced that my grandmother's son-in-law, Frank, had been blown up by a shell while working at a dressing station near Ypres in Belgium. Uncle Frank was a doctor in the Royal Army Medical Corps. A brilliant all-round sportsman, he'd been awarded the DSO for rescuing wounded men under fire. He left a 2-year-old daughter, Prudence, and a widow, Mary, who never recovered from grief. Dad survived without physical wounds, but in the words of my mother, when I first met him after the war, he was just a bag of nerves. I recently spent 3 days in the battlefields of France and Belgium. I wanted to come and see the chalk fields, the woods, and the remaining trenches where Dad lived with his men. This is where they experienced the extremes of fear, anger, despair, and boredom. But Dad always said it was the spirit of the men that kept them going. In these hellholes, men loved like close brothers. They laughed, they wept, and they sang. Laughter and song and chatting up the French girls helped to restore their shattered sensibilities. And saucy and sentimental postcards from the front helped to mask the unspoken dread that was in everybody's thoughts. There was something else that helped to keep their spirits alive, as this intriguing book by Richard Van Emden reveals. Many soldiers of all ranks were lonely and desperately missing their families at home. Needing an outlet for their affections, they found it in the animal kingdom, such as abandoned pets, animals released from a local zoo, or just refugees from the chaos of war. But the closest bond between man and beast was with the horse. Many thousands of these wretched animals were uprooted from the peaceful showers of England and used as a source of power, to haul guns and shells and to carry officers, frequently in the thick of battle. An easy target, horses were slaughtered on both sides in vast numbers. As Dad put it, you soon got used to the sight of dead men, but dead horses were different. After all, it was nothing to do with them. Van Emden's book has numerous accounts of the heartbreaking empathy between horse and man, united in common suffering. And of course, the soldiers had plenty of opportunity to appreciate the wildlife, which, surprisingly, was all around them. To my father and to thousands of other soldiers, the cyclic pattern of nature was a healing source of consolation in a world that had gone mad. And how did nature cope with war? There are numerous accounts of the astonishing resilience of wildlife and its refusal to abandon its tenancy of that blasted earth. And when at last the guns were halted, nature bounced back. The seed banks germinated and the rhythm of life returned, but with a difference. A century on, and the landscape, once victim of sustained gang rape by countless shells, has still not recovered its innocence. The gaping craters, relics of vast exploding mines, have filled with water to become tranquil ponds. Trees have grown again, tall and straight, but there's something disturbing in the breeze, like a sigh of protest that man's unique intelligence could conceive such hideous crimes. The irony of flowers, butterflies and birdsong in the midst of so much destruction was a common topic of war poetry. So who were these poets of war? How could a man do his unmentionable duty in the battlefield and within hours write a poem about larks and primroses? In fact, we now know that hundreds of soldiers scribbled lines of verse in the mess and in the trenches, most of it pretty indifferent stuff, but the best is amongst the most powerful literature in the English language. Probably the best-loved war poet is Wilfred Owen, whose tragic death was just 1 week before the end of the war. His mother received that news just as church bells rang out to celebrate the armistice.
Halted against the shade of a last hill, they fed, and lying easy, were at ease, and finding comfortable chests and knees, carelessly slept. But many there stood still, to face the stark blank sky beyond the ridge, knowing their feet had come to the end of the world.
And this was the same Wilfred Owen writing home to his mother after a battle.
I lost all my earthly faculties and fought like an angel. With my corporal, I captured a German gun and scores of prisoners. I only shot one man with my revolver at about 30 yards. The rest I took with a smile. I have been recommended for the Military Cross and have recommended every single NCO who was with me. My nerves are in perfect order.
Siegfried Sassoon came from a wealthy Anglo-Jewish family. He volunteered early in the war and was known as Mad Jack for his reckless acts of bravery. He once single-handedly cleared 50 Germans from a bunker with grenades, and then sat in the trench to read a book of poems before returning to base.
I could see the ruined villages of Fricourt and Mametz down below on our left, and the long seams of trenches on the other side of the valley, and the leafless, broken trees, shivering sentries of the unhappy countryside. And a meadow pipit was singing, high up above the devastation. And later on, the voice of a thrush came to me from a long way off, muffled by the gusts of wind. A thrush singing behind the German lines. Looking across the parapet at the tangle of wire and the confusion of mine craters, the prospect is not cheerful. Nothing grows. Everything is there for destruction. We came back in a half gale of wind from the northwest, and then I slept and slept, and woke dreaming of an English landscape. When you are standing at your hero's grave, or near some homeless village where he died, remember, through your heart's rekindling pride, the German soldiers who were loyal and brave. Men fought like brutes, and hideous things were done. And you have nourished hatred, harsh and blind. But in that Golgotha, perhaps you'll find the mothers of the men who killed your son. There was a great brawny Scottish major here today, talking of the bayonet. For close on an hour he talked, and all who listened caught fire from his enthusiasm, for he was prophesying. He had his message to deliver. When he'd finished, I went up the hill to my favourite green wood, and there it was quite still except for a few birds, robins and thrushes, and lambs nearby. Church bells were ringing in the town, deep and mellow. A pigeon cooed. Phrases from the bayonet lecture came back to me. The air was still and warm in the spring sunshine. Rooks cawed in the trees. A woodpecker laughed, harsh and derisive.
The bullet and the bayonet are brother and sister. If you don't kill him, he'll kill you. Stick him between the eyes, in the throat, in the chest or round the thighs. Kill them! Kill them! There's only one good Boche, and that's a dead one. Don't waste good steel. 3 inches will do him, and when he coughs, go and find another.
I told the trees what I'd been hearing, but they hate steel, because axes and bayonets are the same to them. They are dressed in their fresh green, every branch showing through the mist of leaves, and the straight stems most lovely against the white and orange sky beyond. And a blackbird's song cries aloud that April cannot understand what war means.
But now on BBC Radio 4, Birds and the Battlefield. Frank Gardner, the BBC's security correspondent, and himself a keen bird watcher, examines the relationship between soldiers and birds through the military engagements of the past century, from the diaries and letters home of those on the Western Front during the First World War to the direct testimony of those now serving in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I was part of the first NATO troops into Bosnia, which was the I-4. We used to stick GOT on the end of that. I forgot.